I never got in the car, but somehow it still knew exactly where I lived. This happened last fall when I was still living in my old apartment in Chicago. It was just after midnight on a Tuesday, and I had stayed late at a friend's place a few blocks over. Normally, I'd just walk. It wasn't far, but the wind had a nasty bite that night, and the neighborhood had gotten sketchier recently. I figured I'd play it safe and call an Uber. The car looked like the one in the app, a dark gray Toyota, but something felt off, like the windows were too tinted, the lights a little too dim. I waved hesitantly, thinking maybe he was waiting for me to come to him. The whole thing felt wrong. Within seconds, I got another ping, this time a message. It wasn't through the app. It came to my actual phone. I ordered the ride, saw the driver's name was Ralph, and noted the profile picture. Middle-aged guy, buzzed hair, dark glasses, looked pretty generic. Not the driver's name, just a string of digits. My heart dropped. I looked up the block. No sign of the car anymore. It had disappeared around the corner. Just my word against a blank screen. But nothing happened. The car rolled past me slow, almost crawling pace, and then it didn't stop. I lived alone, and even though my apartment wasn't on the ground floor, I suddenly felt completely exposed. I checked the Uber app again, trying to make sense of it, but it stayed quiet. Too quiet. The ride had been canceled. There was no record of any messages from Ralph. Nothing about knowing my address. Didn't leave the apartment. Didn't even open the blinds. I kept telling myself it was probably just a creepy guy who got mad I canceled, trying to scare me. But still, how did he get my number? That meant he had seen me through the window. It drove past my building, past the next one, then made a slow, deliberate turn at the end of the block. Like some car in the distance is idling just a little too long. And I keep thinking about how I never actually got in that car. They came, took a statement, but again, there wasn't much they could do. I stayed the night, then 2, then a week. No new messages. No sightings of that car. Eventually, I tried to go back to normal. I figured maybe it was over. No threats, no break-in, and I hadn't gotten a license plate the first night. They suggested I stay with a friend for a while. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Uber. Your driver is arriving soon. He was about 5 minutes away, so I waited on the porch steps, scrolling through my phone. On the windshield was a note, just 3 words, in jagged black ink. But when the little car icon on the app got close just 1 block away, it stopped moving. At first, I thought he was just stuck at a light, but 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I checked again, and the car was still hovering at the same intersection. I messaged through the app, "Hey, are you close?" No reply. I waited a few more minutes, starting to feel uneasy. The car hadn't moved, but I could see a car idling at the corner. Headlights on, just sitting there. I stepped out a little into the sidewalk and squinted. The car immediately pulled forward slowly and started coming up my street. I stepped back toward the porch, half expecting to hear my name called out or see the app confirm the pickup. I canceled immediately. It said, "I know where you live now." I froze. The number was unknown. I went inside immediately, locking both the door and the deadbolt. I tried to report it, but without a completed trip or any threatening messages in the app, there wasn't much to show. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking I'd hear a knock at the window or see headlights sweep across the wall. The next night, I stayed in. At 2:13 a.m., I got another message. This time it said, "I liked the blue hoodie. You should wear that again." I had worn a blue hoodie the night before. I hadn't posted anything on social. I hadn't even left my apartment that day. I called the police, so I did. I went back to my friend Marcus' place, the same one I'd been at the night this all started. But just before I left Mark's place, I checked my car parked out front. I followed you. I didn't go back to that apartment. I moved 3 weeks later, changed my number, and haven't used Uber since. But sometimes, when I'm walking alone or waiting at a light, I feel like someone's still watching. It came to me. And it's still out there. The Uber smelled like cleaning supplies and something faintly metallic. I didn't think much of it until I heard the thumping. It was a Friday night. I had just finished a late shift at the bookstore and was too exhausted to take the train home. I called an Uber like I always did. The driver's name was Ethan, a silver Honda Civic. Quiet. The city faded into the usual late-night blur neon reflections. Shuttered stores, headlights smearing across the windows. But about 5 minutes in, I heard it. A soft thud from behind me, like something hitting the trunk. I paused my podcast and waited. A few seconds passed. Nothing. Maybe something in the back had just shifted. He barely looked at me when I got in. Just nodded and said my name. I buckled up, gave a tired, "Yep, that's me," and settled into the back seat. The rating was fine. 4.9 stars. I didn't think twice. His eyes were fixed on the road. His hands gripped the wheel too tight, knuckles white in the faint dashboard glow. I thought about asking if he heard it, but stopped myself. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Maybe a box back there wasn't secured. Maybe it was just nothing. The car pulled up right in front of the store. It looked clean, maybe too clean, like it had just been detailed. We pulled away, and everything seemed normal at first. Then another thud, louder this time, and a scraping sound. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to adjust my jacket, and glanced at the driver. The next sound wasn't. I leaned forward and said as casually as I could, "Hey, I think the GPS glitched. My place is back that way?" This time it wasn't a thump. It was 3 quick knocks, knock, sharp and deliberate. My mouth went dry. That's when his phone rang. Still nothing. The screen lit up on the dash with an incoming call. "Unknown." He answered on speaker. His voice was calm, too calm. "Yeah," he said. A few seconds of silence, no pedestrians. I didn't know where we were exactly, but I knew I shouldn't be there. Then he chuckled just once and said, and I heard it again, the knocking, followed by what sounded unmistakably like a muffled cry. Choked and panicked. "She hasn't noticed yet." I froze. I couldn't breathe. My hand slowly slid down to my phone, but I didn't unlock it yet. The car hadn't stopped, but we were slowing for a turn. I jumped. I didn't want him to hear the clicks. I stared at the back of his head, willing myself not to panic. But I got up and sprinted toward a gas station about half a block away. I gave them the license plate, the name from the app, the screenshots, everything. Behind me, I heard tires squeal. But he didn't chase me. He kept driving. He hung up. Didn't say another word. Didn't look at me. Just kept driving. No one knows how. The account vanished hours later. The trip record was gone. Uber had no trace of it on their end. That muffled voice. But the route was wrong. I noticed it as soon as we passed the second highway exit. We were going away from my apartment. No answer. I said his name. He just kept driving. That's when I unlocked my phone and pulled up the Uber app. The trip had ended. It said, "Thank you for riding." I hadn't even noticed the notification. The screen now showed no active trip. I turned to look out the window. We were headed into a more industrial part of town. Fewer lights, warehouses, empty lots. I quietly opened the Messages app and texted my roommate. "Call the police. I think I'm in danger." Uber driver ended trip. Not going home. I hit send. There was someone in the trunk. I didn't think. I acted. I grabbed the handle and threw the door open. I hit the pavement hard and rolled. My jeans tore, and I scraped my elbow badly. Inside the station, the clerk saw the blood on my arm and called 911. Police arrived about 10 minutes later. Here's the part that still keeps me up at night. The car was found, abandoned, clean again. No signs of struggle, no blood, no fingerprints, and no one in the trunk. But the weirdest thing? That driver Ethan was real. He was an Uber driver. He had died 6 weeks earlier in a car accident, a different state. They showed me the obituary. Same name, same face. The app? Fake or hijacked. All I know is what I heard. Those knocks. And the phone call I'll never forget. She hasn't noticed yet. I was halfway through the ride when I noticed the Uber app still said, "Your driver is arriving." But by then, the doors were locked, and the man behind the wheel smiled like he had been waiting for me all night. It was a Friday night in late September, just cold enough for breath to hang in the air. I'd been out with coworkers at a bar downtown, and I wasn't drunk, just tired. The kind of tired that makes you want to be anywhere but in public. So when the Uber icon popped up just 2 minutes away, I stepped outside alone to wait. I stood near the curb, phone in one hand, jacket tied around me. The app said the driver's name was Mark, driving a dark gray Nissan Altima, 4.91 stars. Nothing strange. I didn't even double-check the plates when the car pulled up. It was warmer inside than I expected, smelled faintly like pine, and something else I couldn't place sour, maybe. His eyes were pale, almost gray. "You said Jenna, right?" And froze. The app still showed my ride as en route. Mark was still a block away. I blinked and looked again. The little car icon was still circling the bar. The man said nothing, just merged into traffic. Quiet driver, I thought. Fine by me. Same model, same color. The driver leaned over and rolled down the window. "For Jenna?" he asked. I nodded, barely glancing at him. "Faster now?" He unlocked the doors. "You don't remember me, do you?" "Perfect timing," I said, sliding into the back seat. "You used to work at that little bookstore on 8th, right? By the coffee shop with the blue awning?" I trailed off, trying not to sound panicked. "You're Mark?" A few minutes passed in silence. I pulled out my phone to check the route. I hadn't worked there in 2 years. I never mentioned it at the bar. Never posted it online. My stomach dropped. He let it ring once, twice, and then hit decline without breaking eye contact in the mirror. We weren't on the freeway, but the streets were empty and unfamiliar. No streetlights, just warehouses and dark buildings flashing past. I had no idea where we were. "Hey, what's your name again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I fumbled with my phone, hands shaking, opened the app, and tapped the 911 assistance button. "Yeah, but..." He smiled faintly. "Of course." I looked back at the app. Still no change. I tapped, "Call driver." No ringing. Then a buzz coming from my driver's pocket. I felt cold all over. Didn't look back. Didn't even try to grab my phone. I ran until I found a main road, flagged down a stranger, and called the cops. They ran searches based on my description, but nothing ever came of it. No suspects. No car matching what I remembered. It was like he never existed. "Actually," I said, forcing a light laugh, "I think I got in the wrong car. Mind pulling over?" If I'd ignored the sinking feeling, if I'd stayed quiet. The cops said I was lucky. He just looked at me through the mirror, dead calm. He didn't answer, just kept driving. I think about the way he looked at me in the mirror. Calm, familiar, like he knew me. "Hey, I mean it," I said louder. "Let me out. This isn't funny." That's when he finally spoke, voice calm and low. I went completely still. He kept going. I couldn't breathe. The real Mark, the actual Uber driver, called me 20 minutes later, asking where I was. I told him everything. I used to come in all the time, he said. You always looked tired back then too. I slowly reached for the door handle, but it didn't budge. Child lock. He saw me try and chuckled. You checked the car, didn't you? Same model, same color. That's all it takes. People want to trust. Makes it easier. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings, and I remembered something. The emergency feature in the Uber app. He saw the screen in the mirror. His smile dropped. Smart, he muttered, and suddenly veered the car hard right down an alley. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Don't, I screamed. People know I'm in this car. He slammed the brakes. For a second, I thought he was going to reach back, maybe grab me, pull a weapon, but he didn't. You should be more careful, he said. Next time, make sure the plates match. Then he unlocked the doors. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the door open and ran. By the time they got back to the alley, the car was gone. So was my phone. No camera footage, no trace. I filed a police report. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't looked at my phone. But I don't feel lucky. Because even now, late at night, and like he was absolutely sure he'd see me again. I don't remember getting out of the car, but I remember the sound of the door locking behind me, and the man's voice saying, "You've been here before." I had been out with some friends at a housewarming party, just outside of town, one of those Airbnb type places in a quiet neighborhood. You only rent when you want to be loud. The driver's name was Sam, and he looked like the profile photo. Maybe late 40s, glasses, short beard. He gave me a quick nod as I got in and confirmed my name without turning around. Everything seemed normal. But from the moment I shut the door, something felt off. Around midnight, I was tired, just a little buzzed, and ready to call it a night. No music, no small talk, nothing but the hum of the engine and the occasional squeak of the windshield wipers, even though it wasn't raining. I chalked it up to awkwardness and kept to myself, staring out the window. I ordered an Uber and stepped outside to wait on the curb. It was a Saturday night in late September. The car pulled up 5 minutes later. A black Toyota Camry, exactly what the app showed. For one, the GPS never spoke. I didn't hear that familiar robotic voice guiding the driver. Instead, Sam just drove in silence. But 10 minutes into the 12-minute ride, I started noticing we were going the wrong way. At first, I figured maybe he knew a shortcut. Child safety locks. My heart started pounding. I looked at the back of his head, trying to keep my voice steady. But then we turned off the paved road entirely, onto a narrow dirt path that cut into the woods. We'd passed the main exit to the highway that led back to my neighborhood. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but when I pulled it out, there was no signal. The roof was caved in on one side. The windows were either shattered or boarded up, and the front door was hanging off its hinges. Tall grass and thorny vines surrounded the porch, and there was an old swing set in the backyard, rusted and half sunken into the ground. It looked like no one had lived there in decades. Then, the trees opened up into a clearing, and the car came to a slow stop in front of a house, or what was left of one. No map, just a spinning gray circle where my location should have been. Should have been. You just don't remember. I had never seen this place in my life. I didn't grow up around here. None of it made sense. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice calm. Hey, I think you missed a turn. He didn't respond, just kept driving slowly now. The trees pressed in close on either side of the car. Seriously, I said, louder this time. Where are we going? That's when he spoke. His voice was calm, too calm. He wasn't looking at me anymore. It was like I no longer existed. I just stared at the front door of the rotting house. And for a moment, just a second, I swear I saw something move inside, a flicker of shadow, a silhouette in the broken window upstairs, watching. We're almost there. I climbed over the console, scrambled into the front seat, and slammed the driver's door shut. The keys were still in the ignition. I pulled over and called the police, gave them the location, or tried to. The app history had no record of the trip. No Sam, no Camry, no ride ever logged. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out, tires skidding on the dirt, tearing back through the woods as fast as I could, walking up the stairs, hearing a voice whisper my name from the second floor. And always, just before I wake up, I reach a door at the end of the hall, and I remember what's behind it, but never long enough to tell anyone. I didn't look back. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Almost where? He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on the road. I reached for the door handle, but the lock clicked down before I could pull it. I'll pay you double. Just take me home. Still nothing. No bars, no GPS, no nothing. I thought about screaming, breaking the window, anything. But something about the stillness of the woods, the way that house waited, made my skin crawl. I didn't know what was in there, but I knew it had been waiting for me. Another minute passed, maybe two. It looked completely abandoned. That's when Sam turned around. He looked me dead in the eyes with the calmest expression I've ever seen and said, "We're here." I froze. "What?" He smiled, just slightly. "You came here once before. You were very young. You left something behind." I stared at him, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Then he said, "Go ahead." The door's open. The locks clicked again, this time unlocking. I didn't move. I turned back to the driver. "Who are you?" But he didn't answer. He just looked forward again, hands on the wheel, as if waiting for me to get out. I tried dialing 911, but the call failed instantly. I looked back at the driver one last time. "I'm not going in there." His face didn't change. "You already did." And then he opened his own door, stepped out, and started walking toward the house. I didn't wait. I didn't stop driving until I was back near civilization, where my phone finally lit up again. And when the cops checked the clearing the next morning, there was no house. No structure, just trees and weeds. Nothing had stood there for at least 50 years. But ever since that night, I've had dreams. Not just of the house, but of being inside it. He never said a word, just smiled at me through the mirror, eyes wide and glassy, as the car drifted farther and farther away from anything familiar. It was just past 11 p.m. on a rainy Thursday night, and I'd just finished a late shift at the restaurant I bartended downtown. I was exhausted mentally and physically, and didn't feel like dealing with the subway that late. So I called an Uber like I'd done 100 times before. I stood under the awning while the rain tapped against the sidewalk, watching the little black car icon approach me on the app. Toyota Camry, 4.8 stars. Driver's name was Brian. No red flags. The kind of chill you feel in an empty house. I shivered and pulled my hoodie tighter around me. The car pulled up quietly, headlights dimmed under the drizzle. The driver didn't respond, just nodded slowly, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. I figured maybe he was one of those quiet types. No big deal. I glanced down at my phone to check the ETA to 17 minutes to my apartment. We were moving, but something felt off. The streets looked darker than usual. I checked the app again. I opened the back door and stepped in without hesitation. The app's rerouting, but it's sending us way out of the way. The first thing I noticed was the cold. Not just air-conditioned cold, something sharper. "Evening," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "That's where I live," I said, a little firmer this time. We were heading away from the city, into some kind of industrial backroad area I'd never seen before. I looked back at the app. The ETA had jumped to 24 minutes. My fingers hovered over the door handle. I considered pretending to take a call, maybe faking a destination change. Anything to snap him out of whatever this was. Teeth barely visible under thin lips that were stretched in a way that didn't quite look natural. I forced a polite smile and looked away, chalking it up to awkward timing. Maybe he was zoned out or something. When I looked up, I caught his eyes in the rearview mirror. He was staring at me. Completely dead. No bars. I glanced at the dashboard. No GPS screen. Just static on the radio, faint and crackling. The car moved steadily forward, down narrower and narrower roads, the rain now a constant hiss against the windows. Not glancing, not checking the road, just staring, unblinking, smiling. A few minutes passed. Then, without warning, he turned down a dirt road I hadn't even seen coming. I reached into my bag slowly and wrapped my fingers around my pepper spray. I was trying not to panic, but it was getting harder by the second. The car crept to a stop in front of what looked like an old warehouse. No lights, no signs, just a rotted loading dock and a door half hanging off its hinges. The trees closed in around us like a tunnel. There were no lights, just the sound of tires on gravel and the soft hum of that static. Hey, I think you missed the turn back there, I said cautiously. No answer. My ride had been canceled due to a connection error a minute before I entered the vehicle. I leaned forward slightly. Still nothing. Just the smile. His eyes hadn't moved from the mirror. I felt my skin start to crawl. I glanced out the window. Streetlights were growing sparse, and the buildings were thinning out. Hey, could you take the next right and head back toward Maine? Nothing. He didn't even blink. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The rear-view mirror, he hadn't adjusted it. It wasn't angled for traffic. It was angled directly at me. I just ran into the woods, soaked and shivering, stumbling over branches until I saw lights again. A gas station, maybe a mile away. I burst in, babbling and crying. The clerk called the cops. That is when it hit me. He hadn't looked at the road once since I got in. I opened the Uber app and hit the contact support button, but my signal was gone. I leaned forward again. I want to get out. Let me out of the car, right now. He didn't even acknowledge me. Just smiled. I slammed my palm against the back of his seat. Hey, I said, let me out. The car slowed. Not abruptly, just enough to lull me into thinking he might finally be listening. My hands were shaking. And that's when he finally spoke. Still staring at me through the mirror, he said in a hoarse, almost childlike voice, "We're here." I didn't wait. I yanked the door open and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. They never found the car. According to Uber, no driver named Brian was ever assigned to my request. But that wasn't the worst part. When I checked my trip history later, there was a completed ride listed for that night. Different driver, different router. But the drop-off location was still marked. A remote warehouse. In the middle of nowhere. Marked as home.